around her face.
Commercial break.
So this is where I would kind of just gently roll it out, or gently like kind of close my shears as I slide, but not like a drag, just kind of dusting and getting a little of that shape.
You're kind of over directing the direction you want it to.
Yeah, I'm just kind of dragging it to connect, and then what I always do at the end is then I put it back down. I always take this really fine section all the way down their part line that won't even really show. It's so fine, but I over direct it and I take my shortest into the longest and just kind of take off that, because I feel like that's what creates this shape. So it doesn't so it will have something to grab into when they run their fingers through it, but not necessarily create a layer down it. So not going too deep. And then I would go through and break all this up. It's not so heavy.
Yeah, I feel like, Kaylee, I don't know if, when you were saying that, like, you do create more of like a shorter layer on the top, and I do too, but it's not purposeful necessarily. It's like, I do the shape, and then I go in and I texturize, and I end up with it being a bit more layered, but to keep that veil over the top makes a ton of sense.
Putting it in the inside.
Yes, there's so
just
much more
take that
control over it,
off,
yeah.
hide that, and then you put it all in there, and then that way that covers it, so you still have that weight pushing all that shape you put in underneath.
Yeah, totally.
Because everything, if like, that's why I think about texturizing as it's your interior cut. So everything you want to hide all that interior with something. Like when you see those really blunt bobs that have all that shatteringness, the top layer is usually probably very lightly cut, except maybe some little triangles on that top layer. But everything is on the inside. You know, you're using this whole panel here to create all your texture. And if you take out too much on this part or too much underneath, it just looks thin. So you want to focus on where the densest part of the hair is, and then that's where you create all your texture.
Sometimes I'll do like the longest pieces that
Yeah,
that you want
first.
first, and then like kind of
Yeah.
like have like that be your guide in a way, and then over direct to connect to that versus short to long too.
Yeah. No, like you want,
Especially
oh wait,
with
you
the
do your
longer
longest?
thing. Yeah, like
Yeah.
I'll just like take my section, do it all that length, and then over direct one and the other, and then textures on top.
So to me, the concept of creating your longest shape first makes sense. And to me, why I would do that is this is where they want their framing to be. But I don't think that you need to cut the whole perimeter, because then you've cut like 4 extra steps of cutting, and then you're gonna go back in and recut it all to create your shape.
So you
It's
start
like with a
that
layered
shape.
haircut, you create your perimeter, but like if you're going in and you're layering it, there's no reason to go panel by panel and pull all that hair down and give it a
'Cause you're gonna
trim
cut
it, and then go back in and cut that much more. You've just added like 3 sections plus, you know, every cut you're bringing down. It's like 9 extra steps.
Right.
So if you know you're cutting the hair, so create your perimeter, exterior long perimeter like you want to do, but then move into
That section.
of what you're going to cut short,
Right.
rather than cutting it long and then cutting it again.
And keep cutting.
You're just you're just adding so many steps to cutting.
Right.
So once you know you're gonna cut that hair off, just cut it off with the right cut versus adding second cut in.
Right.
Unless it feels really dense and overwhelming to put that many, to like have like if she had all one length hair and then you were to go and put that in, I feel like sometimes it's like you get nervous and you're like, is this really what I'm supposed to be cutting? Because it's so much more. And so then you're like, I'm just gonna cut this straight. That way I'm following the same guide and cutting the same amount of hair off. But like we've all done hair for a long time. We know that that's what we're gonna do. And so just understanding where that hair is gonna fall when it goes back, then like I think when you understand that, then you're not gonna worry about, you're not gonna add so many steps to your haircut.
Sure.
Like, cause like that's what you were asking me before. It's like, how do I?
I'm trying to flip it away.
I'm like, what is happening? She got a big old tangle on there. But like I think that's one of the biggest things that takes a haircut so long is by cutting so many extra steps.
Totally.
Instead of just cutting your shape.
Yeah.
And also, that's where I say you can texturize first. You know, when you know what you're gonna do, you could texturize a little first, so that you, I don't know, I take that back. I think if it makes you comfortable, do it that way, but I just don't think you need to do it that way, because I think that you know what you're gonna be cutting in the end, so I say start with that.
Yeah.
I also like with this area, like the fringe, I like to cut with a razor a lot around the hairline because it's just softer. But some people do not like a razor because they've had a bad experience at one point. But a razor just eliminates so many steps too. Like if you're just doing it to create softness on the ends, instead of going back in and doing this throughout your entire fringe line, just use a razor and cut it with a razor, because that's what you're doing. I mean, unless for some reason their hair cannot handle a razor, which I think that's not really a large amount of people. I just think that razors are used wrong.
I agree.
So, you know, with the fringe line in general, you're not typically doing long, swoopy texture anyway, because you want weight, but you do want softness. You know, that's why most people, they like a bang trim 2 weeks later, because it's like broken down, those ends are softer. Yeah. Another one I saw recently that I did like, that would not have as much texture, would be kind of like what you were saying, Keely, where they just picked this line over there where they wanted the end to be, and just over directed the entire thing across and straight. And then we're just like, and then that was their shape. You know, and and I think it works. I just think you're gonna have to go back in and put a lot of texture, because it's super, it's really a strong look. I like just to do baby little ones, because then you have more control. By doing fine little sections, you have more control of over directing a little more, because when you're working with this much of a hair panel, this section, that little tiny bit of the customization of being able to take it just one little step over direction and over directing a tiny bit more, even your fingertip just goes a little further. It's more customized to their head shape. It's softer. It doesn't just look like a YouTube, 2 big chunks. It's just, you get this versus this. So it's just, well, it was part on the side, and I just haven't reblown it dry. That's a little insane over here. This is what happens when you don't teach your client how to properly blow dry their bangs. They're like, I never want them again. But that was just kind of an exterior shape. Oh, one of the things, so, 2 more questions about these kind of shape of bangs.
No,
I like it.
Dude, she's gotta tell her Rachel.
Yeah, she does. What's that?
Season 2.
No. So with men's haircut texturizing, I feel is a little different. That, I guess just a couple things about it. So I like to do a lot of men's cutting with my texturizing shears, like doing the perimeter, especially like on their like half haircuts, and just using, because what these create, texturizing shears create volume to me. Like they don't really remove bulk, but the moment you use texturizing shears on the top half of the head, you get volume. Yeah, you just get, and if somebody wants volume, that's great. But when we use them for men above the bend of the head, that just creates this versus this. But down below, you can create this nice shape of it collapsing in by just using your texturizing shears just to kind of carve it in versus like necessarily the clippers each time, because then it just gets square. So I will do a lot of using my texturizing shears like around to create that indentation, because then they look like they've had like a haircut a week and a half ago versus they got it today. So that's a nice way to create a little more movement, or those really tight men's cuts that don't quite look like a barber style cut. And then I always texturize it on an angle, so for men's cuts, I don't do anything really squared off. Yeah, I just had a little bit to say about men's, but that was one of the biggest things, was about using texturizing shears down here. I use a lot of razoring on the top to break it up, and also right in this area to like remove that bulk that gets poofy really fast on guys. I think with men, texturizing is mostly meant to remove bulk for them and to help their haircut last a little longer. I think that's one thing that they appreciate, is when their cut lasts just that extra week or two.
Love it.
Is that helpful?
Yeah,
Awesome.
that's great. Thanks, Jamie.
Yeah.